Well, welcome everyone. My name is Bill Green, and I am a co-coordinator for the Four Corners Tea Party that is helping to put this event on tonight. We are a new tea party in the area, and we're called Four Corners because we're sort of centered in the Braselton area, and where the four counties all come together with that wonderful monument with a big stone ball on top of it. At the Four Corners Monument. So Hall County, Jackson County, Barrow County, and Gwinnett County, in that basic region is what we cover. But we welcome anyone and everyone. All patriots are welcome, and so we appreciate everyone that's been able to come out for this tonight. This is one of our first events, and so let me just explain a little bit about what we're doing and how it came about, which was, as you know, there is a special election, or I hope you know, there is a special election coming up on May 11th. There is one for the larger area, which is the District 9 congressional race. And there is, for a smaller area, there is the District 49 state Senate race. And so that is coming up in just a couple of weeks. And so we were hoping that there was going to be a forum just for this race. But since there wasn't one, then we stepped up and we said we'll put one on and invite whoever can come. And so we invited all three candidates. Unfortunately, Butch Miller had to beg off this afternoon with some other engagements. So, but we do have 2 out of 3, and 2 out of 3 ain't bad. And we also were very blessed to have Martha Zoller agree to be the moderator tonight. So all questions have come from her head and are on her sheet. And then if you'll notice, there's some cards on every table. If you've got any questions that you want to see answered as well, then just fill those out, and at a certain point we'll just take them up, or you can bring them over to the table or whatever, and Martha will look through those and ask some of those as well. So if we could have the candidates that are here come on up here. Brandon Gibbons is one of our candidates. Jimmy Norman is our other candidate. So let's welcome them to this forum. The format, as agreed upon, is they're each going to have a 10-minute opening statement. And then Martha is going to start asking questions, and they'll each have 2 minutes to answer questions, and then if there's a rebuttal that is needed, then they'll have time to give rebuttals as well. So with that, please welcome Martha Zoller.
Thank you all for being here, and I appreciate that very much. I am on a new radio station, FM 103.7. So for those of you that have lost me, maybe you can find me again. It'd be great to do that. I'm on 15 stations around the state also, as well as in the Gainesville area. And we just moved our office to the Wachovia building. So I hope you'll come see us sometime. And I will tell you, I was sitting in here, a couple of ladies came in that I've known for a long time. I have my list of questions here that we're going to get to. But I said, what do you want to know from these folks? And the first thing they said was, I want to know a little more about them. So we're going to start out with a opening statement from each one. And we'll start with Brandon Gibbons. You'll have about 10 minutes. If you take less than that, fine. But don't take more. That's what we've got the timekeeper for. But a little time about why you're running and about yourself, so that we can get to know you a little better. Brandon Gibbons.
I moved to the state about 7 years ago, and I made it my home. I've really enjoyed living here. I love living by the lake. I love living in Metro Atlanta. I've been employed as a school teacher here for about 4 years. I was a business owner here too, and I learned a lot from that experience. I come from Arkansas originally, a state similar to Georgia in many ways. I've been educated in Japan as well. I won a scholarship from a company in Arkansas. They build tubes. And they sent me to Japan to study international relations. And I found that very interesting. And I enjoyed learning about their way of government as well. I've been to the Mises Institute in Auburn and learned about free market economics. And that was a very important experience there. I've completed a master's degree in special education, and in 2 more months, I'll complete my specialist in early childhood education. I have a very broad education, a lot of experience and knowledge. And with this knowledge, I've become concerned. A few weeks ago, I received a call, and I was asked, by the Libertarian Party. They said, there's a special election, and you know they don't really like debate. We have huge signature requirements to get on the ballot, but there is a loophole. With a special election, it's a filing fee. So with that in mind, I thought this is an opportunity to speak up about free market principles and reason. So I charged ahead, and here I am. So I've rushed to put together a campaign from scratch, and it's been a difficult task. I'm sure one Mr. Norman understands. There's some issues that I'm very concerned about. One is education. The Georgia Constitution actually states that the primary responsibility of the government of Georgia is public education. In my 4 years as a teacher, I have watched federal mandates slowly erode away the power of the local school districts, the drive and morale of the teachers. Right now, with the race to the top and the way that that's being pushed by the federal government, and the way Georgia Republicans are rushing to get that money, this could be the death blow to public education. Every year, we face new mandates and new changes that are counterproductive. The research indicates that what works best in the classroom are small classroom sizes, teacher quality, planning time, and early special education intervention. Instead, we've received standardized tests. They seem to have recognized the concept of quality, the need for quality teachers. So they mandate that we receive additional professional learning credits. It seems reasonable enough, however, that eats away at our planning time. And it's debatable how much is ever even learned from these educational seminars. If we want a quality education, we may very well have to stop accepting federal money. It is our constitutional responsibility to do so as a state. Their mandates, to pay for their mandates, they provide 10 to 25% of funding, depending upon the district. But I can be fairly certain they cost more than that. The problem is they are not educators. They do not know what they're doing, and they do not empirically test their proposals. But when they fail, they blame the teachers. And they blame a fictitious teachers' union. There is no teachers' union in Georgia. There is a professional association. Teachers cannot go on strike. Teachers cannot negotiate contracts. But they're a convenient target. And this thinking has to stop. We have to get back to the Constitution of Georgia and take care of our kids. We want to save money? Invest in education. Every dollar spent in early childhood education saves 13 in future taxpayer dollars. Think of the savings. If you intervene in the first 3 grades and a child who is developing a learning disability, you intervene when they are young, then the next 10 years, you do not have to pay for the special education teacher. You provide them the opportunity to go to college or develop a vocational trade. Very similar things have happened with healthcare. Politicians who know nothing about hospital administration. Those are the ones developing these plans. If we want to fix healthcare, we have to create a committee of patient advocates, insurance executives, human resources officers, those players who understand. And we have to listen to them. And that's the problem. We're not coming together and listening to all parties concerned. We're concerned about our own immediate interest. It's time we sit down and talk things out. I'm tired of the partisanship. I do not want to consider someone an enemy because they are a Republican or because they are a Democrat. I'm sure there are common ground on things we can agree on. So when you ask why I ran to spread that message. Got how much time? Time check?
You've still got another 3 items.
All right. All right. Things we should be concerned about too, with the failing economy. We have to attract jobs. We have to, job growth is very important. And tax reform is important. We should look at eliminating the corporate income tax as it only collects 2.8% of our budget. But we need to be careful about what we rush into. Right now, there is an argument every year between Atlanta and the municipalities over sales tax dollars. We have to first initiate a point of sale reform before we can have a straight fair tax debate. And then we opt for the state itself. Otherwise, the municipalities and the school districts, the counties and cities, will not have a direct way to fund their fire departments, their police, or their schools. Every year, they will have to beg Atlanta for scraps. And that is not a situation we want. That takes the power away from the local communities. And we have to also find a reasonable method of distributing that money when we do point-of-sale tax reform. And what I'm referring to there is when sales tax is done, the percentage for the county goes to the county, the percentage for the city goes to the city, and the percentage for the state goes to the state. And if we were to implement that reform, we still have to be reasonable and find out how to make sure the counties and municipalities still are not underfunded. Because imagine, if I'm speaking of a fair tax specifically, if I live in Hall County, I'm using their police service, their school service. But I work in Gwinnett and do my shopping in Gwinnett, and my sales taxes are all spent there. Hall County is responsible for providing these public services but not receiving the funds. So we need to figure this out. How can we handle this without it becoming completely within the control of the politicians in Atlanta? Because when they have that money, they're not going to want to let it go. I look forward to a lively discussion, and I hope we learn from each other. Thank you.
Thank you. And next up for the opening statement, Jimmy Norman.
I'm afraid if I talk for 10 minutes, you won't have any questions left, so I'll keep it kind of simple. Just a little bit about me, first of all. My professional background is all in real estate. Started in real estate sales when I was 18. I got my broker's license at 21 or 22. Done building, developing, even property management, several different areas of real estate. And I've seen over the years that the government intervention in my industry, like in so many industries, has just gotten more and more. And that's sort of a key, and not specifically related to real estate, but government intervention in general. The thing I want to focus on is the role of government. I think if we get the proper role of government, we'll be okay. And then I want to talk specifically some about taxes too. On the role of government, basically I think government exists to protect the life, liberty, and private property of the citizens. And too much, we've gotten the idea that government is somehow capable of providing that. And that's not the case. They are our protectors. And they should not be doing as many things as they're doing now. And what is being done isn't being done at the right level. I believe that as much as possible, the families should be in control. Individuals, families, and as close as you can get in the local community is where most decisions should be made. And the state needs to make a significant amount of decisions. But what we've got is the reverse. The national level government is controlling everything in our lives. And the state is being told what to do. So the national government is no longer helpful to the states. It's a hindrance and a burden. Whereas the states came together to form the union for the benefit of the states, now it's gotten upside down, and it's a top-down power oligopoly of just a small group of people. And we need the states to stand up for their rights and minimize the size of the federal government. So you may think, why am I running for state senate instead of running for Congress? And I thought that through, because I thought about running for Congress in the 9th District, knowing there was going to be an open seat. But I really believe it goes against human nature for us to think that we're going to elect people at the national level who, once they're in a position of power, are going to voluntarily give up that power. I mean, there are some who are willing to do that. There are some true statesmen out there, and I appreciate their work. But I think the The real area where we can do it is at the state level. If we stand up to for the constitutional rights that we're given, and we tell the federal government, you have some things you can do. It's Article 1, Section 8. Other than that, leave us alone. That will touch on all the issues we bring up probably. But let me talk, since subject's been brought up about taxes. I believe basically that the main tax in Georgia should be on consumption. Basically a state model of the fair tax, I think, is the best political and economic solution, because we need to get rid of the income tax for so many reasons. The corporate income tax is killing our corporations. We're not competitive, not just with our neighboring states, we're not competitive overseas. For us to have good industry here, we need to completely get rid of the corporate income tax. We also need to get rid of the corporate personal income tax, because that discourages savings and investments, which goes into that cycle that creates the jobs. And we also need to get rid of property taxes, because property taxes, well, they're just evil. I mean, it's just a fundamentally wrong thing. I mean, it's fascist for us to think that it's okay for the government to own our property and rent it to us every year. And that's basically what we have now. Our businesses, our means of production, and our homes are something that we rent from the government. And I believe if we just totally eliminate that concept, we'll all be better off and stronger. Real estate values in Georgia will stabilize. It will be good for communities, good for individuals, very helpful for retired people. It's just the right thing to do. And I think we can make up for that loss much more efficiently and with less personal costs and administrative costs by going to a consumption-based tax for the bulk of that. I'll reserve the remainder of my time. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think what they're going to try to do is I'm going to ask the question and we'll come up. You'll come up and give the answer. I think we said 2 minutes for the answer, but we'll keep it as flexible as we can. I think that we've got a number of questions here, and let's start first with water policy. We've got a situation where we continue to have the issues with the tri-state water wars. The clock is ticking as far as the 3 years we have to make a decision. But while the lake is very full right now, one of the biggest responsibilities in this district is to talk about water policy and to determine what that is on the state level. So I'd like each of you to comment on water policy and what your views are on that. We'll start with Jimmy on this one.
Well, this is something I take personally. The last few years I've been looking at what used to be a dock, which has been a little deck in my backyard. So I do believe we need better water management, not just for me personally, but for Atlanta and the benefit of the state. It is a key issue, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier about what is the right level of government to control an issue. And we've got a case now where rain that almost exclusively falls in Georgia goes into that lake, and we have Alabama saying they own the water, Florida saying they own the water, and the federal government saying they get to decide. Well, I don't think it's Alabama's water if it rains in Georgia. I don't think it's Florida's water, but I want to be a good neighbor, and I think we can, and we can provide for their needs in a reasonable way. But I think Georgia owns that water, and we need to tell the federal government to take a hike. The fact that they built that dam decades ago does not, to me, give them the right to control all the water that rains on Georgia and goes through what was a river and a small lake, and now is just a bigger lake. So I say it's a matter of states' rights, and we should just say to the federal government, you weren't allowed to do that under Article 1, Section 8, and it doesn't apply, and if we have to, take it back by eminent domain.
Well, Lake Lanier is vital to our economy. Not only is it a $5 billion a year tourist industry, we need the water to continue to grow as a community. It's interesting you mention Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, because that does give the federal government the power to regulate commerce between the states. And then the 1983 Supreme Court case, Voorhees versus Nebraska, it was ruled that water flowing between states was the domain of the federal government. So it very clearly is a constitutional issue. Now, the federal law dictates that when a river flows through various states, each state has the right to an equal amount of water. I personally believe that's a bit unfair, because what if only a mile of that river goes through that state? But to make threats of taking it by eminent domain is somewhat hypocritical. It's like, oh, I support the Constitution when it's convenient for me. And I don't like that sort of talk. What we need to do is, there's 13 other communities in the country facing a very similar problem. We need to have our congressmen contact the congressmen in those districts and then come up with an appropriate solution on the federal level, which this is a federal question. And say, hey, perhaps it should be by miles. How many miles is this river in the country? What in the state? And then water is drawn based upon that. That dam, if it were not for that dam, we would have had devastating droughts without any water whatsoever. That dam is responsible throughout 1957 and 56, and even recently without the dam, we would have not had water. So it was vital for our community's development to say, no thank you is.
Okay, second question. Of course, Arizona's been in the news a lot the last few days regarding illegal immigration legislation that they passed. Prior to the passing of their legislation, Georgia's legislation was the toughest illegal immigration law in the state, in the country, and was quite successful actually in making what Jerry Gonzalez of the Georgia Association of Latino Elected Officials say, Georgia an inhospitable place for immigrants. Well, I think they made it an inhospitable place for illegal immigrants, but it was because of the federal government's failure that Georgia acted and now Arizona acted. What's your thoughts on that? Nathan Deal, who's running for governor, has said he would implement Arizona-type legislation if he's elected governor. So what do you think about that? We'll let Brandon go first on this one.
Well, this is definitely a case where my libertarian will come out. I'm very skeptical. I'm very skeptical of this law. It seems to me like more and more our police are being used to harass and intimidate citizens. Should we all be required to carry a national ID card? That is the only way this could be done with minimal harassment. You walk around, the police say, hey, are you legal? Then you show your ID card, they leave you alone. Otherwise, you may be pulled in if you speak with an accent or you don't look like you're from the area. They'll pull you in and question you until you can prove you're a citizen. Is this good for our country? Is this the direction we want to go? A similar law was passed in a county in Virginia, Manassas County. Property values dropped by 40%. It didn't work there. The good thing about having a federation of states is when one state enacts a law, we can look at it and see what happens. So let's take a wait and see approach to what Arizona did. I'm not jumping on any bandwagons. And even if it proves successful, at what cost do we want to give up our liberty?
I'll jump on that bandwagon. I think Arizona's doing the right thing, and I stand by it and would support Georgia doing the same thing. And going back to my original position, it's an issue of governmental authority. Who's supposed to do what? Our national level government, number one, is to protect us from foreign invasion. Our state government, number one, is to protect us from killing and robbing from each other. Our county governments provide the local needs of the communities. And I think if the national government doesn't do what it's supposed to do, then the states have to do what they have to do. Unfortunately, we've got a federal government who doesn't do what they're supposed to do, and they do everything they're not supposed to do. So I think we need some accountability there, and I think we can do that to some extent from the state level.
Jobs, of course, I would venture to say as you're traveling around this district, that jobs and the economy and healthcare are probably the things people want to talk about. But jobs is probably at the top of the list. I know it is for people that I meet. There was a Jobs Act that was passed, that was introduced by former Representative Tom Graves, who's running for the 9th District, and his opponent, Lee Hawkins, opposed the bill ultimately, although he voted for it last time. And I think there's good arguments on both sides. Senator Hawkins said that the provisions had been watered down, so it wouldn't really create new jobs. Representative Graves said no, that it did do some things to create jobs. So what is the government's role in creating jobs, if there is one? And what can the state government do to help create jobs? So we'll start with Jimmy Norman this time.
The government has one key fundamental role in job creation, and that's to get out of the way. Okay, if they'll quit taxing the businesses so that the businesses can provide for the productivity of the citizens, we'll all be better off. And corporations, they're picked on by people who don't really understand and haven't thought it through. I mean, corporations can't pay taxes. I mean, all they do is they get a bill, they add it to the cost of their product or service, we pay it anyway. It's just extra administrative expenses, and there's no justification for it. And it makes us less competitive with our neighboring states and less competitive overseas. And the things that they want to do that sound like they're doing something. Oh, we've got this great jobs bill. If you'll do this, then we'll do that. And you do this, and you hire somebody you wouldn't hire, or you hire this person we won't hire, or you build this kind of facility, and we'll help you out a little bit. It's just like the mandates from the federal government. They'll give you $1, and you beg to get, you give them money, and you beg to get some of it back. If they just stay out of the way, lower the taxes, lower the regulations as well, because the regulations are bad too, because you not only have to pay the extra costs of unnecessary regulations, you have to pay the government to tell you what to do. So it's costing us twice, even more. We're uncompetitive. If the government just gets out of the way, Georgia would have such a thriving economy that we would not have so many of the problems we have now, because we would have virtually no unemployment of people who had any ability to work and any desire to work.
Well, I definitely agree that the government needs to get out of the way as much as is feasible. And we should look into, we have to actually contact small business owners to find out what are these regulations that are hindering them. One, of course, is the self-employment tax, but that's more of a federal issue. What can we do as a state and as a community? Well, one, when companies are looking to set up somewhere, they want an educated workforce. So investing in education is awful helpful. We also have to maintain our reputation as a modern hub, maintain our reputation as a modern hub of transportation. We were once terminus. We have to keep that image alive. We have the ability to attract foreign investment. There are lots of companies, especially Indian and Chinese, looking to enter the American market. I disagree with many of the same concepts that Mr. Norman does about lots of special programs to bring certain businesses in. That does, that's basically robbing Peter to pay Paul, and that's nonsensical. But having a modern transportation system and education in place helps. Another thing we can do is spend smarter. I'm an advocate of the Farm to Table program for schools. We already spend $80 million a year on school lunches. Many of these are bought from processing centers with the money going out of state. If we already have to spend that money, why are we not spending it on local farms? Decatur did that with a 10% increase. Now bear in mind that for every dollar spent locally, it's spent again 3 more times. So we also need to look at the way we spend money.
And we'll get more in depth in education later, because that's where we spend most of our money. But I wanted to talk a little bit, or have you all address a little bit about the size of government. It looks like when they drop the gavel down tonight and run out of the chamber, and we'll all be a safer place because the legislature's not in session and taking our money, it looks like we'll be at about 2003 levels of the state budget, with education being, they are going to try to keep it around 2006 levels, realizing that there's a lot of money that's involved, and to Brandon's point about it being something that's in the Georgia Constitution to be required to. How do you determine what the level of government should be? And if you're elected into the state Senate, even though they're not responsible for the budget, how are you going to work with your colleagues to determine the size of budget? And we'll start with Brandon this time.
Well, that's again another reason why I'm running as a libertarian right now, because often what happens is when people get elected, it becomes a party of parties. They all get together and they make decisions, and people are kind of told how to vote. And then if they vote in a certain way, maybe they get to head a certain committee, and there's not really any sit down and debate and discussion about what really is important. I have to be realistic. If I'm elected, there's probably nothing immediately I can do to actually work to lessen the budget, except stand in the way of nonsense. But my election would send a message that what the people want is for our elected representatives and elected officials to discuss ways to lower the budget. I have ideas, But there's almost no use in sharing them, as I would simply be a senator. Just one, in a party of one. But if there's more independents and more libertarians, they'll start paying attention.
I wish our empty chair was here, because I think you'd see a big difference in this particular issue. I saw it explained earlier at a GOP function when it was recommended that we raise two kinds of taxes on truckers, taxes on cigarettes, and taxes on food. And I think fundamentally that's the attitude so many of our elected officials have. They have this idea that we want this much government and we've got this much income. So their first thought is, how do we get the income up to here? I say, don't do that. If you've got that situation, you figure out how you cut the cost of the amount of income you've got, then you cut it some more so you can cut some taxes, and then you cut it some more until you get the government down to where it should be, which is a very small fraction of what it is now. A smaller fraction at the state level, and a much smaller fraction at the national level. As to how to get there, I think we need to start individually, everybody who's in the General Assembly, with the assumption when any bill that costs any money comes across your desk, you assume you're going to vote no. It's got to pass several tests before you even give it serious consideration, because we just run into so many things that sound good on the surface without realizing they're prone by nature in government to grow. And if they're not going to be efficient, and they're not cost effective, and most importantly, if they're not the role of government to start with, we shouldn't do it. And the government is doing too much of what should be done by individuals, by families, by communities, by churches, by independent charities. We just have too much government. And as to what that actual number should be, instead of 17 billion something, I don't know. It's way less than that. It might be $5 billion to do what the government really should be doing. And my bias will be no. Vote for me, I can say no.
I think one of the most dramatic points this year in the legislative session was when Senator Preston Smith took to the well and said that he was that the state senate could be the pimps, but he was not going to be a prostitute for all the extra spending and extra taxes. And he is now running for Attorney General, and it's kind of an interesting thing. Now, the backstory of that was that a number of senators, because they would not toe the line on the budget, lost their chairmanships. And of course, our lieutenant governor is from this area. Love Casey Cagle. I mean, he is a great guy, but he is the leader of the Senate. So he is the person that, that condoned that particular thing that happened. What are your thoughts, and this may not be a 3-minute answer, but what are your thoughts on that particular situation, and how do you stand up to the leadership, and will you be somebody that will stand up to the leadership? Jimmy, we'll go with you first.
God bless Preston Smith, and I support him for Attorney General. And shame on Casey Cagle, he made a mistake on this one. As to what happens, you just have to be willing to say no. You have to be willing to take the right road. If it costs you a committee chairmanship, it costs you a committee chairmanship. And playing party politics just to get along, just to please the people in control, does not work in the long run. I may not have any great committee assignments. They may make me sit in the back of the room, but I'm going to say no if I think it's the right thing to say no. And we had 3 good Republicans that stood for their conscience, and they got punished for it. And that's just wrong. I'm glad that they were called out on it publicly. I'm glad that information is available. And if you're not familiar with it, I hope you'll check out the story and a lot of great Facebook comments on it. This touched a nerve with a lot of people, and the Republican Party needs to clean its act up. And I think it's got some incentive to do that now.
I like to think I'm the incentive to do that, because they'll see more of me. That sort of thing is the exact reason why I didn't, or I could never run as a Republican, at least not in Hall County. That's the sort of thing that has to stop. What I would do is apparently the same as what would happen with you, and not get any special chairmanships. The value in voting for a libertarian, though, is people hear that. They notice, hold it. With the Republican Party in power, when they play that game, suddenly there's third-party candidates getting elected. They're going to be less likely to play that game again.
Now we'll get into 4 big topics, and we're going to ask 4 different questions about it, but it's going to be transportation, education, trauma, health, and then health care. And we'll start with transportation. We've gone through a number of governors that, haven't done anything on the transportation situation. We've got a Department of Transportation there's $2 billion that are missing that they can't account for. We've got projects that once they start, the environmental impact of them means that it's 15 years from conception before a road is built. So we do have a bill that was passed on transportation. It might be signed by the government. It is a sales tax and a regional district type of bill. What's your thoughts on what needs to be done on transportation, and what is the role of government there? We'll start with you, Brandon.
Well, I believe in local control as much as possible. This is one that is a classic example of the funding problems with the consumption tax. It's because transportation is often paid for by a consumption tax, and there is this constant bickering and squabbling over where the money should go. You also have issues with, rural counties. They need roads too. So how much money should really go there? And this is an issue where I think rail lines have gotten a very bad reputation. Because when you have a road, how is that road profitable? If you build a county road, it's subsidized by the government. If the people in Atlanta wish to vote on a tax to pay for a rail line in Atlanta to lower their traffic congestion, that's the business of the people of Atlanta. I support the idea of these regional transportation boards. I'm not incredibly happy with the way it's written up right now, but I think that's a step in the right direction, because what I would like to see is more local control of what projects are funded and the funding therein. If we do start the SPLOST taxes for transportation, that means the Department of Transportation's overall budget needs to be cut down. We also have to find a way that from, I would say, gasoline taxes to match dollar for dollar these projects, or a certain percentage. But when the state does decide to help a county or district build a road or a rail line, it should also be necessary that they can fund the maintenance of it. Otherwise, they will constantly have to come back to the state itself, and guess what's going to happen to their elected senator and congressman? He's going to need road money. What's he going to have to vote on to get that road money to stay elected? Which again goes to the libertarian point of trying to keep the money raised as locally as possible.
We certainly do have some issues with transportation, but I think it's if you've spent a lot of time in other states, we're really not in that bad a shape compared to a lot of people. I mean, we complain, but we've got smooth roads all over this state in terms of the mid-level roads. We need more capacity in metro Atlanta, but some of the biggest problems I see are on the very small roads, where you live, where your house is. And that is totally a local issue as to how that money is spent, I think. As for the funding for transportation projects in general, I think it should be a consumption tax, because that's basically the best tax just in general. But on that one, you can even make it specific, because if it's taxes on gasoline and diesel, it's the people who do the damage who pay the fee. It's the people who use the service who pay the fee. So it's a very fair way of doing it. As for rails, I don't think they're very well proven in most cases. If Atlanta wants to expand MARTA and keep paying to bail it out because it doesn't pay, because it's not worth what it costs, apparently, to the riders, then that's their decision. But I don't think that should be passed on to the rest of the state. And I don't think that other types of light rail and high-tech rail have any possibility of being economically advantageous. They're sexy to talk about, this 200-mile-an-hour trains and such. But basically, you build a train, everybody's still got to get in the car and go to the train station. And when they get off the train, they still got to find some way to get to where they're going, unless they're going right there. And I don't think the people of Georgia want trains and buses for their main transportation. We need more road capacity. And if we plan ahead and do it efficiently, that's the most efficient, least expensive way to do it. And it's the one that provides the most utility for the individuals.
Mark Stein that wrote a book called America Alone. If you haven't read it, you should get it. But he makes the comment in the book, you know, when I get up in the morning, I go to the end of my driveway, I expect there to be a road there. Other than that, I want government out of my life. So it's a funny line. Okay, let's talk about healthcare. And we'll sort of combine healthcare on the state level along with the trauma network because it is a complicated issue. Ever since at least 2002, probably before, the fastest growing portion of the budget has been Medicaid. And we have always been extremely generous in Georgia about Medicaid. We haven't just funded at the poverty level, we funded at more than the poverty level. We provide peach care, we provide a lot of opportunities for people to be covered, but Medicaid is a growing problem. We also have only one level 1 trauma center in this part of the state, and that's Grady Hospital. So what's your view on what needs to be done as far as a trauma network and about state health care in general? I mean, not so much about the federal part of it, which I know a lot of people talk about, but state role in health care. And we'll start with Jimmy this time.
I'll go back to my basic premise. I want them to get out of the way. A lot of the problems we have in healthcare are because of government regulations. And like only having one major trauma center in the area, well, you have to go through incredible hoops to get a permit for any type of hospital. I mean, the idea that you have to have a certificate of need for a private industry to operate a private business for profit is outrageous. The free enterprise system can provide virtually everything better than the government can, and I don't see any reason why healthcare is an exception to that rule. So I say less government is the answer.
Well, I agree that less government is, as a rule, the answer. The Georgia Constitution does give the state of Georgia the authority and responsibility to help with health care. And this is an issue where I'll have to say, I am not a doctor. I've never worked in a hospital. I've been a social worker before. I could comment on things that might improve that system. There's strength in knowing what one doesn't know. What we need to solve this problem is a commission of people, all parties involved, hospital administrators who can say what regulations are holding them back, insurance companies who can express why is it their rates are going up, and patients' rights advocates as well, and Chamber of Commerce leaders and human resources leaders because our insurance is largely provided by employers. When they get together and talk, we can find out what specifically is going on. Just waking up one day and saying, well, we're not going to have any laws about health care, that's not going to fix the problem. We still have to find solutions and find out what was wrong.
I've got a couple more questions, but if you have any questions, just hold your hand up that you've got a card. If you have a question that I haven't asked and you would like to ask, and we'll get those up here and get those questions asked. Just quickly, you know, yes or no, do you think we need a Department of Education on the state level?
Oh, yeah.
Should it be reduced?
I think we could stand to
Right.
reduce it, yes.
What about you, Department of Education? Do we need that?
No.
Okay. Because, you know, that's an interesting thing to look at. Once you have a department, you know, I was driving around Washington, D.C. a few years ago, and Washington, D.C. is still a boom town, okay? They have about 6.5% unemployment rate, which in today's world is boom town. But I was driving around, and there was building everywhere, and offices, and they put this pretty little awning outside of the Department of Education, and I thought to myself, they're never going to make government smaller, because as soon as you have these offices to fill up, people aren't going to leave. So that's why we've got to take drastic action, that's for sure. Okay, let's talk a little bit first about term limits. Do you believe in term limits? And, you know, what are your thoughts about that? Should elected officials be term limited? And we'll start this time with Jimmy.
I have mixed emotions on the issue, and I don't have a firm position. We should not need term limits. If we had a responsible electorate, we have term limits built into the system now. If we can educate the people, which people are starting to get educated, I mean, the Tea Party movements, classes on the Constitution, there's a lot of private volunteer work going on now to give us an educated populace, and I think that will help. But it may be that we just have to do it, and I don't have a problem with it. For me personally, I think a good rule of thumb is no more than 6 years in any office without a break. And for me personally, I don't expect to be there that long, but the longest I could even imagine would be 6 years in the state Senate and 1 term in the U.S. Senate would be the most you'll ever see of me.
I have mixed emotions as well. There's a couple of, well, maybe 1 or 2 elected officials that I would be sad if term limits were in place, because because I wouldn't see them anymore, like Ron Paul. So I have very mixed feelings about that issue, and I have no firm opinion on it either way at this point.
Do you have a commitment on your own? Have you thought about how long you would serve if you were elected?
Personally, I would probably keep, as long as I would be elected, I would see it as my responsibility to continue to serve.
Okay. Hey, do you claim a fiscally conservative position? If so, what kind of fiscal conservative are you? Are you a cut spending and cut taxes to balance budgets, raise taxes and raise spending to balance budgets, or to raise taxes and cut spending to balance budgets? So we'll start with Brandon on this one.
Well, we spend smarter, but I believe we can cut the overall size of government. I think if we could get all parties to the table, we could cut the state government by 15%. There would be some agencies that we might have to increase because of lateral costs. Such things like we might have to invest in the Department of Juvenile Justice, and then that will lead to savings with the Department of Corrections later. But there are plenty of agencies where they're doing cross jobs, that positions can be eliminated, but it's going to take a serious effort to coordinate and do that. And I think with budget cuts, there should be tax cuts. But as long as there's a deficit, I would have to say we do the budget cuts first and then pay off the debt. We got into a lot of our trouble because when we had surpluses, the Republican administration would spend it or want to reduce taxes, which I'm generally fine with tax reduction, but that's just like saying I've got $10,000 in my bank account. Oh, well, let me go ahead and spend it. No, I save it for later. And the administration just didn't seem to think past 6 months or a year. But that's actually the problem with all government, is they think immediately.
I think we can do better than cutting government 15%, and I think we cut services and government intervention, government programs, government regulation before we raise taxes. In fact, I don't think we'll need to raise taxes if we run properly as far as the eye can see. We're getting more taxes now than we need for a lot more government than what we need to be providing. So I say lower the cost of government, make it pay its way. I'm not sure what I've left out other than I would really appreciate y'all's vote and support in this election. And if you have any more questions, I'm very available. My flyers, which I suspect most of you got, that's my cell phone number right there. That's the phone. I'm very available. I think we talked about just about everything. The Second Amendment I referred to there just because it came up in another thing. I believe in the Second Amendment as an individual right. Some say it's a state right, some say it's an individual right. I think we can all agree that the federal government has no role in it. Basically, I'm for less government. I want you to have control over your life. I want you to have control over your business. I want only the government intervention that's necessary to protect our lives and our freedoms and our liberties and our property. And, basic infrastructure. Having a road into the driveway is nice. I'll go that far. But government is bigger than it should be, and it's too centralized. Too much at the national, a little too much at the state, and the local governments need better funding where they can control the issues up close and personal.
I'm all in favor of local control, and we do have to get the Fed and federal spending under control. That definitely must happen. I'd like, for the sake of fair disclosure, mention I am a GAE member and district rep. I also have a concealed carry permit. I'm very much in favor of the right to keep and bear arms. I would like to end by just responding to some things that came up in the debate that concerned me a little bit. One was about the issue of no strings attached vouchers. I would like to reiterate that there has never been a single study that shows that this is effective. All studies comparing students from private schools and public schools, dollar for dollar, public education wins. If we go to no strings attached vouchers, what that's going to do is the kids, of course, the parents will get the money to go to the school. The school could deny any child for any reason. That's no strings attached. The Georgia Constitution, our number one obligation as a state is to provide for a public education. This is denying kids their rights. What about kids with special needs? What's going to happen to them? Even now, there's a voucher program for the free market for kids with special needs. I'm a special education teacher, but it doesn't provide enough to educate these kids. Not only a minority of the kids available for this voucher can use it. Another issue, let's see, rail. Speaking of rail, you mentioned, well, at the end of the rail, I got to get in the car. And so that doesn't make any sense, but so should we not have airports? I mean, it's also, I favor free market solutions. And right now, roads have a government monopoly. You have no, there is no consumer choice in certain regions, like especially the bigger cities. They really should have a public transport option. So it takes away from the free market principle to only subsidize roads. I favor empowering the consumer and consumer choice. The free market principle will help people decide. Thank you.
I believe we should allow airports, and I believe they should be privatized too.
All right, well, a couple of things to wrap up. First of all, I want to thank Martha Zoller for her wonderful job of moderating. Thank you for coming out and volunteering your time for this. And don't forget to listen to her show every single day.
FM 103.7.
FM 103.7. And I also want to thank the members of the media that have come out this evening as well. And thank you for being there to serve your community. And most of all, I want to thank the candidates that did come tonight, Brandon Gibbons, Jimmy Norman. I think they did a wonderful job. And we're excited. In closing, the one thing that I want to make sure everyone can walk away with is knowledge of the candidates. And so, Brandon, what's your website?
GibbonsForSenate.com.
GibbonsForSenate.com.
JimmyNormanForSenate.com.
JimmyNormanForSenate.com. And unfortunately, Butch Miller wasn't here, but I believe his is VoteForButch.com. So, research, study, find out what the candidates believe, find the one that agrees with you the most, and get out there on May 11th and vote, or go and vote early before that takes place. Thank you all so much for coming. You can go to our website, fourcornersteaparty.com, for future events too. Thank you very much.